Hey everyone, it's Mark with Crate and Kaptivate, and I have here the NewBeeDrone Hummingbird V3 race spec. This thing is ultra light and ultra fast. So my question is, who is this actually suited for? Well, hopefully this video will help answer that. And to start out, I just want to quickly go over some of the specs. So the frame they're using is the Cockroach Light AF 65mm racing frame. It has an all-in-one flight controller with a built-in ELRS receiver and a built-in 25mW VTX. So it is limited to only 25 milliwatts because this quad is designed for racing. For the ELRS receiver, it has a wire antenna, and for the VTX, it has a mini UFL. The camera is the NewBeeDrone BI, and it's held in place by this TPU camera mount. It has 31mm AZ tri-blade props mounted on Hummingbird 0702 30,000 kV motors. And the battery connector is the G&B A30, which is compatible with BT 2.0. And I've mostly been flying with these Lava 300s, which are BT 2.0. And I've also been using these Lava 260s, but the flight times are a fair bit shorter with these. And on my scale, it weighs just 16.35 grams without a battery. And with the Lava 300s, it weighs 24.54 grams. And with the 260s, it weighs 23.39 grams. Now, when it comes to flying this thing, right off the bat, one of the first things I noticed was it seemed quieter than my other whoops of this size. And it might not be so apparent from the audio in this video, but it just sounds like the motors run very smoothly. And I'm not sure if it's the weight of the drone or the high kV motors, probably a combination of both, but it feels super light on the controls. And that being said, I do find it a bit more difficult to control. The throttle can be fairly touchy, so flying in small spaces can be challenging. But I think more so what makes this difficult to fly in small spaces is the aggressive camera angle. If I compare it to either the Air 65 or the Mobula 6, the camera angle is a fair bit steeper than those. So if you're just cruising around, you're almost looking up at the ceiling most of the time, and you just don't have the spatial awareness that you would with a lesser camera angle. And speaking of the camera, I don't find the image quality as sharp as some of the other cameras. And around lights or windows in the daytime, the image can get quite blown out. So if I compare it to, say, the image from the CO3 camera, I much prefer the CO3. But for the purpose of flying around, I think the quality is sufficient enough. Now, I did also mention in the beginning that the VTX is limited to 25 milliwatts. And you can see from the flight footage that there is some breakup. But I'm able to fly all throughout my house and even into the basement without any issue. So for indoors, the 25 milliwatts works fine for me. And if you were outdoors flying around a playground, it would probably also be fine. I just don't know what the max range would be. Now, as far as controllability, it does fly very well. The controls feel totally locked in, and it's got more than enough power. In fact, at the end of my flights, when I look at my average throttle, it's usually under 30%. Now, I don't know much about tuning, but out of the box, I'd say the tune feels pretty dialed in, at least for my skill level. And it has been a lot of fun to fly. It's very agile, so you can do a lot in a small space, if you can keep the speed under control. And so far, durability hasn't been an issue. I've crashed it a number of times, and some of those have been pretty hard crashes. And I've only bent and had to replace a couple of props. So if you notice at times it sounds a bit different, those are the bent props. One issue I have had is the battery pushing through the holder with harder crashes. And that's one thing I did notice the first time I used it. The batteries feel really loose when you first put them in, but once you get it all the way in, so it's supported by these little posts on either side, it snugs up a bit, and then when you plug it in, it kind of holds it in place. But you can see the battery does push through with not a lot of force. but it doesn't happen that often, so it hasn't been a real issue. Now, as far as flight times, I was getting somewhere around 3 minutes 45 seconds with the Lava 300s, and I think it was down to around 3 minutes with the Lava 260s. And I have to add that I was flying around fairly conservatively, which isn't easy with this thing. But when I got those flight times, I was just trying to fly around somewhat smoothly without crashing. So when it comes down to usability, I would say first and foremost, this is aimed at people that will be racing. And if I compare this to something like my Mobula 6 or the Air 65, I find those are much easier to fly. And it's not that this thing doesn't fly well, it's because I'm flying in a small indoor space, and with the high camera angle, I end up flying too fast and I just don't have the skill to keep it under control. So it would be nice if you could reduce the camera angle, but if I also had a larger space or was flying outdoors, it would be a lot more fun and less crashing. And that's one thing, once the weather gets better and there's not a bunch of snow on the ground, I'm looking forward to taking this thing outside because I'm sure it would be a blast flying around one of the local parks. So hopefully this has provided you with some helpful information and maybe answered the question, who is the Hummingbird V3 race spec suited for? Anyways, thanks for watching and I'll see you on the next one.